Hello, everyone. Welcome to Triangle Be Well. I was a deer in the headlights there for a second. I haven't been in the studio for 2 weeks, so I guess I forget what all this equipment is for. But here's Amnon to remind me. Hello, Amnon.
Hello, Howard.
How
How
are
are you?
you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm enjoying this weather.
You couldn't get out of the house last week. We
No,
couldn't either.
that's right. It's hard to believe it was
And
just a
look at
week.
today.
70 degrees, sunny. We uncovered the plants in the garden, and they were all like the greens, the kale, and the collards, and the Swiss charge. It was like lying on the ground, like after a battle, and out in the sun and the sunlight and the warmth for 2 days, it's like sprouted back up. So that's kind of how I feel today. I spent 10 hours over the weekend getting beaten up by people who are better than me at martial arts. So I woke up all stiff this morning, but got out into the sun a little bit, and I'm thrilled to be with you here today. This is part 3 of our series on habits and behavior change and how to change long-standing patterns to newer, healthier habits. So I'll remind you that there's a call-in number. It is 915-518-9773. We'd love to hear from you. You can also Skype in on Computer's 2K voice, 2K, like this broadcast is brought to you by the number 2 and the letter K voice, 2K, Computer's 2K voice, and we would love to patch you in and have a discussion. Also, if you're in the Triangle region of North Carolina, a few things coming up. February 1st today, Rabbit, and that means tomorrow's Groundhog Day, but also February 14th is Valentine's Day, and part of the eating plan that I recommend, Dietary Excellence, at the very, very tippy top of the pyramid, at the bottom of the pyramid, we have our 64 ounces of water.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's right there.
Oh, here it is. My glass of cold water. Thank you. That's the fundamental bottom of the pyramid, the most of anything we consume during the day. And then above that are kind of starchy foods, lentils, beans, legumes, corn, whole grains. And above that, we've got, green vegetables, we've got fruits, in smaller amounts, nuts and seeds, and kind of fattier plant foods like avocados and olives. Above that, if you choose, organic meat or fresh caught fish, maybe twice a week, 3 times a week, optional, not required. And certainly the less of it you have, the better. And at the very, very top, the tippy top of the triangle, we have something called treats. And treats means, for most people, once in a while, going off the plan completely is not going to kill you. So a glass of wine every couple of months, a little bit of chocolate here and there. It's important that if you can handle it, some people, when they have a treat like chocolate cake or ice cream, that resets their entire metabolism. It resets their entire taste buds. They've become acclimated to healthy foods, but all of a sudden this gives such a giant dopamine rush that it throws everything off. And those people are very susceptible to food addictions. And just like you wouldn't take an alcoholic and say, well, just have a glass of wine, it would send them down the wrong path. There are people for whom treats are not a good idea, or at least the kind of treats that got them into trouble in the first place. But the good news is those people know who they are, and most of us can handle the occasional treat, and it actually helps reinforce that it's the exception, not the rule. So all that is to say that February is chocolate month, which is to say not every day, not 3 times a day, but if you want, a nice chocolate dessert on Valentine's Day, which is to say I've got 2 chocolate classes coming up. Healthy Chocolate Dreams, there's one on next Monday, a week from today, in Durham at Holistic Health Studio on Hackberry Lane. You can look that up on Google Maps, or you can find out more about it at trianglebewell.com/events. and that's in the evening. And I'm doing a reprise of that class the following Saturday, the 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, at Peaceful River Farm in Chapel Hill. And that is the idea of these classes is to give people a taste of desserts that are delicious. They're treats. You definitely don't want to have them every day, but they don't contain ingredients that are going to compromise your health in the short term or in the long term. So they don't have dairy, they don't have eggs, they don't have refined sugar, white flour, and you can still have very, very healthy chocolates. And the chocolates we're going to make, the cakes, pies, smoothies, pudding, stuff like, souffle, whatever we're going to make, stuff like that is going to range from pretty good for you, but I wouldn't have it all the time, to literally things you could have on a weekly basis. So if you like chocolate and you like being healthy and you like cooking and you like eating and you like Valentine's Day, then you could check that out. Again, tbwell.com or trianglebewell.com if you've got time to spare, /events. So that brings us to part 3 of behavior change. And it's interesting because this all comes from a presentation that I give called Shift Easy. And the presentation that I give, I only get an hour to give it. And so I thought this was going to be one session, but there's something really nice about knowing that I have next week and the week after and the week after, and I'm kind of discovering my inner yakety yak that I can go on to these topics and really draw them out and bring out aspects that I hadn't thought of or that I'm a little bit too rushed to come up with. So I hope the first 2 parts of this series have been helpful, and let's move on right now to part 3. So to recap, first week I talked about obstacles to change. Second week I talked about 3 mindsets, I talked about 2 mindsets to change. I believe I didn't, where did I get to last week? Did I talk about all 3 mindsets? Did I talk about playfulness and Yoda?
I don't remember that, but I'll tell you. What was last week.
I made a note, but I wrote it down, I scribbled it, I didn't understand it afterwards. I'm vamping here. I'm drinking water while Amnon does the heavy lifting here and looks up where we were.
No, last time was behavior changing part 2.
Right. So
You said we'll do. Yeah. You were going to do it this time.
Right. So I think we covered 3 mindsets and 1. We covered did we cover the Tiny Habits formula? I don't think so.
Doesn't sound familiar.
No. Okay, so today let's jump right into the 3 strategies for shifting behavior. I don't know if we missed something. If we missed something, I'll come back and do it next week.
Yeah, I'm going to leave a paper clip here for you.
Oh, excellent. You just stick it right onto the iPad. Okay, so strategy number 1 is to shrink the shift, make the change smaller. That is counterintuitive because you think, well, if I want to change everything, right? There's no point in making a tiny little change to my diet that's not even going to register. It's not going to show me the results that I want. Both true. But we'll talk about how you can do both of those, how you can have both progress and aim towards perfection at the same time. Second one is to tweak the backdrop. So remember we talked about backdrop, your environment. I just published today on the Plant Yourself podcast an interview with Chef AJ, and we were talking about, she talks about food addiction and how most of us are, to more or lesser extent, addicted to the highly processed foods, highly palatable foods in our culture, and how you can't even get away from them. She was saying she takes her dog to Petco for grooming, and what do they sell at the checkout counter at Petco? Right there, they sell human treats. They sell candy bars, M&Ms, Snickers. She goes to the hardware store to buy a box of screws. What do they sell at the checkout? Same thing, M&Ms, Mars, Snickers bars, hard candy. Pet stores and hardware stores. And she talked about going to visit a friend in the hospital. And in the hospital parking lot, there's a vending machine selling junk food. Before you even get into the hospital, before they even foist their disease-causing food on patients and visitors and staff, you can buy soda, chips, candy in the vending machine in the hospital parking lot. The question is, why is this stuff so ubiquitous? Why is it available everywhere? And we'll get into that, but right now the main idea is you've got to create your own backdrop, because if you just don't have a bubble and you're going out into this world in which all this highly palatable, highly addictive food is being thrown at you from every direction, and it's cheap. It's much cheaper to get a candy bar than it is to get a piece of fruit or a sandwich or a bag of raw nuts and seeds and dried fruit, right? You ever go to the airport? The candy bar is $1.25, and the little bag of raw almonds is $6.95. So we're going to talk about tweaking the backdrop, changing our environment to make it easier. The third is a mindset, which is pre-worry and post-mortem. So shrink the shift. So I'm going to show you a little picture here, courtesy of the iPad. This is a journal that I was given for a present.
Other way.
Like that. There we go. Well, yeah, it's a picture of a leather-bound journal. This was given to me as a gift. Might have been leather, might have been faux leather. I'm not really sure. It was given to me as a gift. And it was given to me in 1999, and I was told, journaling is really good for you. You get your thoughts down on paper, you gain clarity, you can write down your goals, you can write down things that bother you. Most successful people who, achieve their goals journal, people who do deep inner work and grow their consciousness journal. So I said, okay, well, I'm sold, that's great, let me journal. So first day, I opened up that journal and I wrote 3 pages. So proud of myself. And I know all this because I dated all my entries. Second day, I wrote half a page. Third day, nothing. Fourth day, nothing. Seventh day, I came in, I wrote a couple of paragraphs, and then I didn't write it in again for 3 years. I just stopped. And the reason I stopped is it was too hard. I just, what am I going to write? I didn't know what to write. I'm going to write 2-3 pages. I don't want to write my deepest thoughts. I don't even want to think my deepest thoughts. I don't even want to acknowledge my deepest thoughts, let alone think them, let alone write them down, let alone see them staring me in the face, indicting me for having them. So I put it away. Then I was going to a conference like 3 years later, and I needed a notebook, and I didn't have a marble notebook or anything else, and so I grabbed the journal. And there's a couple of pages of conference notes, writing down my notes from what speakers said. And then I didn't write it in again. And then like 5 years later, I tried to journal again. I was going through a bad time. I was having, I was a little bit depressed. I was miserable. I didn't know what was going on. So I pulled out the journal, and in that moment of need, I was able to write down those words because it was helping me to feel a little bit better. And then I stopped again. So fast forward to about 2014, I thought, well, something triggered me. I want to journal again. But instead of saying, all right, I'm going to open up that journal and every day I'm going to write 3 pages, or, oh, you know what it was? I had read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and she talks about morning pages, just 45 minutes in the morning, just getting everything out there. I thought, well, you know what? I'd love to do that. I'm sure I'd be a wonderful person if I did it. I'm sure my life would be better, but I have a long history of having those intentions and not doing it. So instead of that, I shrunk that shift. I made it much smaller. So, and the way I learned this from B.J. Fogg, whom we talked about in the first session when we talked about the behavior model. And he has a model of behavior change called Tiny Habits. And you can find out more on his website, behavioral model or behaviormodel.org or .com or something. Just look up B.J. Fogg, that's Fogg with 2 G's, behavior model, you'll find it. So here's the formula. After X, ... do the smallest behavior you can think of that moves you in the direction of your goal, ... Congratulate yourself, ... Keep track, and adjust as necessary. Now that's 5 different points. So we're going to talk about each one of those. After X, X is some existing behavior or environmental cue that you can rely on. So a lot of people have the intention to do something, and remember we talked about the motivation, ability, and trigger. So people are motivated. I want to meditate every morning. I want to write in my journal every day. I want to do 20 push-ups. You know, how hard is it for me to just, hit the deck and do 20 push-ups once, twice, 3, 5 times a day? You know, it would definitely make me feel better. It would boost my energy level, but I can go weeks without doing it. So the Tiny Habits formula is after X, after something that you know is going to happen. So for example, every one of us wakes up in the morning. If we're alive, it means we woke up in the morning, unless you stayed up all night. So one of your X could be after my feet hit the ground as I get out of bed. So you could say, after my feet hit the ground when I get out of bed, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths and really focus on filling my air with fresh oxygen. So then that would be the after X. And the second one, the smallest behavior you can think of, well, 3 breaths is quite a large behavior. I would say maybe just 1. So when I wake up in the morning, my feet hit the ground. After my feet hit the ground, I'm going to take 1 deep conscious breath. Then I'm going to self-congratulate. I'm going to go, right on, you go, boy. Yeah, Howie. Sometimes I call myself Howie. Pat myself on the back. You rock. Hoo-ah. Do a little Marines cheer that I learned from Scent of a Woman. Oh, yeah. Whatever I want to do, something that lets me know that I'm proud of myself. And it sounds corny, but there is a neurological reason for that. So that's 3, self-congratulate. 4 is keep track. And so don't just do it, but write it down. How many days in a row have I done that? How many times a day have I done that? And 5, adjust as necessary. Suppose I say, okay, that's my formula. After my feet hit the ground in the morning, I'm going to take 1, oh, it feels so good, deep, conscious breath. I'm going to go, oh, yeah. And I'm going to write it down somewhere, keep track on an app on my phone, or put it in a notebook, or etch it and with a machete on a piece of wood, however I want to keep track of it. What if I find myself after 3 days not doing it anymore? Then that's where the 5th one comes in, adjust. Don't assume you're going to get it right the very first time. Don't assume that just because you set up a formula and it complies with what BJ Fogg suggests, that you're going to get it right every single time. So after X, the smallest behavior you can think of that'll move you in the direction that you want to go of your goal, self-congratulate, keep track, and adjust as necessary. So for example, suppose I forget after a few days. Well, then maybe I'm not awake enough once my feet hit the ground. Maybe I want to change it to when I flush the toilet. Maybe I need to get kind of stuff out of the way first before I can really be awake enough to think. So then I change my cue, my X, to after I flush the toilet, I take a long, deep breath. Probably a better idea to do it after than before. So how does this connect to my journal? I made a rule. I said after I finish meditating, so this was a point in my life when I was meditating every day. At the moment, I'm not doing it, but I may get back to it. I'll have to see. I was meditating every morning for 20 minutes. And my rule was when I finish meditating, I open my journal and I write 1 sentence. Now, you might think 1 sentence. What good would that do if I just write, and the sentence could be anything. It could be, I have nothing to say today. But here's what I discovered. When I set the rule of instead of 45 minutes or 3 pages or 12 paragraphs or 500 words or anything, when I set the rule as I'm going to write one sentence in my journal. I did it because it was easy. And remember again that motivational, the asymptotic line. When something is hard, you need a lot of motivation. When something's easy, you need very little motivation to do it. If it's easy enough, you don't need to be motivated at all. It can just become a habit, right? Which is a form of sort of internalized, unconscious motivation that you don't even need to get yourself excited about it anymore. I no longer have to get excited about putting on my seatbelt in the car. In fact, if I get in the car and I'm not wearing a seatbelt, I feel uncomfortable. So motivation is now completely irrelevant to whether I put a seatbelt on or not. So I sit and I write one sentence in my journal, and then I congratulate myself. Oh yeah, baby, I've done it. Now, I'm sitting there with that journal open in front of me. Do I just close it? I can. I can close it and know that I have accomplished my goal. But what happened is, most of the time, I would write another sentence, and then another sentence, and then I'd get into my thoughts, and then I would be writing paragraphs. And it turns out that what I disliked was not writing for 15, 20 minutes. It was beginning to write. You can think about it like jumping into a cold body of water. Once you're in and you warm up, it's okay. It's that first initial bit of getting into the water that's uncomfortable. So this tiny habits formula allows us to dip a toe in and invites us to follow that toe with the whole foot, the leg, the torso, and the whole body. So another example that BJ likes to give, and he gives it in his talks, in public talks, is flossing. So here's his formula. After I brush my teeth, I floss one tooth. Then I give myself a high five, and I see how many days in a row I can do this. And if I forget, I'll tweak the background and try again. So that was the first habit that I started with. I talked about flossing. All right.
I mean, just
Okay. Good. Well, this is for people who missed the last one then. You're right. I did talk about this one. So, coming back to me. So again, this is about positive habits, not negative ones. You can't get rid of a negative habit by this method. What you can do is replace it with an incompatible good habit. So instead of eating less meat, it becomes eating more plants. And now I remember. So maybe when this goes on YouTube, we can cut out this bit. And, sounds like a lot of work. So what BJ says is that tiny habits grow to their proper size when planted in the right place. And when you do this, you boost your confidence, you enhance your capability, you create positive momentum that reinforces the shift, and that enhanced ability. Now you have more ability, so now the motivation bar is lower. So after flossing one tooth, I can now floss all my teeth. And I don't need to be motivated to do it. I just do it because I got better at it, because I practiced. And your tiny food habits can grow from one meatless meal per week to one meatless day per week to now you're soaking your oats in the refrigerator in preparation for breakfast. You're cooking beans and grains in bulk on Sunday afternoon. You're saving vegetable clippings, and after a little bit, all these individual discrete changes means that you're basically eating a whole food plant-based diet, and you didn't have to go to the mat against all of your habits. All right. Here's for the new stuff now, right? Tweak your background. So if I had tweaked my background, if I had put a marker where I was here, if I hadn't come in cold and tried to remember where I'd left off last week, this is where I would have started. So the background is very important. And in fact, I wrote that note, but I scribbled it. So remember the flossing example. Didn't work for me at first, even though it seemed airtight. After I brushed my teeth, I flossed one tooth. And the reason was that my dental floss, I kept it in a place in my medicine cabinet that was down. I thought it was the best place to put it because it was right near where my hand would reach it. But the truth is it was out of line of sight when I opened it. It was down in a corner, and I just wasn't seeing it. I wasn't getting that mental cue. And it turns out that brushing my teeth wasn't enough at the beginning. It wasn't enough of a reminder for me to floss afterwards. I hadn't developed the connection. Like I sit in the car, I put on the seatbelt. When I get out of the car, ignition, put it into park, ignition off, lights off, seatbelt up, open the door. It's like I get out like a habit. You ever see athletes, especially baseball players, who tend to be very ritualistic? I don't know if other sports do this as well. I guess basketball at the free throw line, or golfers before they hit. All those people who are doing something in which there's a high percentage chance of failure, they very often go through rituals. Tennis players who serve, each tennis player will bounce the ball the same number of times, the same cadence, turn, back up, throw it. Baseball players will tap here, bounce here, look here, get up. If they, swing the bat 3 times. Basketball players on the free throw line. So they've created a neural pathway that works whether they don't even have to think about it anymore. They will do it in their sleep. And that's the goal of tiny habits. But until you've developed those tiny habits, you want to have help. And my little dental floss down in the corner was not helping. So what I did was, and I'll show. I don't know if this will show well enough, but there it is. And you see the little red circle in the corner? That's where my dental floss was. And where am I going? That's where I moved it to. So on the picture, on the other side, it's now, you see that? I moved it. Now it's easier to see. It's right there. Before it was with the dental stuff. It was next to my toothbrush. That made sense to me. All right, you put your dental floss next, but I wasn't seeing it. My toothbrush took up the whole thing. Then I moved it up there with my shaving stuff, and from that moment on, every day I would see it there, and it would sit there, and I would imagine it accusing me, like, really? You're gonna leave the house with that grime between your teeth? And I said, no, dental floss, I'm not. I will floss one tooth. Let's do the same one every day because that's where I start. And once I started, of course, why stop? I'll just do all the teeth. And pretty soon that became the habit, to the point where I no longer needed the cue. This was in my old house. I moved to a new house. Now the dental floss can be anywhere, and I will search for it. If I finish brushing my teeth, if it's not sitting right there, if somebody cleaned up or it fell over or something, I am like crawling on the floor. I'm under the bed. I'm looking for you. Now it's like putting on that seatbelt. Now it's a habit. And I think I mentioned this before. My favorite definition of habit is something that it hurts not to do. So now, not flossing after I brush hurts. So, if I ran out of dental floss and I couldn't find something that was going to do the job, rummage through my wife's sewing kit or something like that, I would have to get in the car, go to the store and buy dental floss, or go to a neighbor's house and borrow it. That's how much it would bother me. So, all from tweaking the backdrop. And you tweak the backdrop, you change your environment, and again, hearkening back to BJ's model, to increase ability. In some cases, things are hard because the background makes them hard. One of my favorite cartoons, I can't remember where I saw this originally, but it shows a desk and an office desk, and there's a pair of legs sitting on the desk. So the feet are up here on the desk, and you can see sort of a person off the picture, sort of sitting on the floor. Their back's on the floor, and their feet are on the desk, and there's computer monitor and all this stuff. And the caption is, "I'd be more productive if I had a chair." And you think about like a productivity guru for some company coming in and saying, well, let's make everybody more productive. You think about the things that they would do to improve morale or to improve efficiency. And yet the problem here is the person doesn't have a chair. And none of that's going to work. But you give them the chair, then they're sitting up, their hands are on their keyboard, they're near their phone, then they can be productive. And very often, we are unproductive because we don't have a chair. So if your kitchen isn't set up to cook and store, prepare, reheat, serve healthy food, then you're not going to do it. If you don't have a cutting board, you're not going to cut vegetables. If your knives are dull, and I've got to tell you, most people's knives are so dull. Nobody, people like don't sharpen their knives. They get the knives, I don't know, as a wedding present or something, or a hand-me-down, or they go to Target or Bed Bath and Beyond and they buy a nice knife and they never sharpen it. And and after a while, it's like, you know, hacking with a like the end of a steel ruler. And doing that is dangerous because you have to put a lot more pressure on, and if you slip, all that pressure is going to go into your gristle and bone, and it makes it very unpleasant to chop things, and you don't get to chop them cleanly, so you can't. You need good tools to do good work. So if you tweak your environment to increase, one of the ways it can work is to increase your ability. Now things are easier. If you get a beautiful bamboo cutting board, or if you get a maple cutting board and a knife that you love and it feels good in your hand, and you take a couple of lessons in knife skills and you learn how to use it, then instead of, oh, I got to make dinner, I got to cut these vegetables, all of a sudden, because it's easy, it becomes something pleasurable. We like doing things that are easy. All right, one of the ways that we can tell if a kid is going to get really good at something is, do they like doing it? And we like doing things that make us feel accomplished. It's hard to do something when you feel like a complete beginner. After 10 hours of getting beaten up this weekend by martial artists, I could tell you it's not fun to feel like you're a beginner, like you don't know what you're doing. So things that make us feel accomplished have a feedback loop where we'll keep working at it, we'll keep getting better at it. So if you can figure out a way to change your environment to increase your ability, because something is now easier, because you have better tools, because it's more accessible, because it's more fun, then you just lowered the barrier and you need less motivation. Another reason to tweak your backdrop, to change your environment, is what I did with the dental floss, which is to install, or in this case, intensify a trigger. So the main trigger was brushing my teeth. But until I had made that neural connection, the visual trigger was dental floss. And so I intensified the trigger by putting it more in my face. It was now in my line of sight. It wasn't sitting there hiding in the corner. And another reason to tweak your backdrop is that it makes other desired behaviors easier. So the things you want to do can now suddenly be easier. For example, if, like, we cook a lot of whole grains, and we get whole grains in bulk from Whole Foods or health food stores, and very often they come in plastic bags or paper bags. The ones I can't stand are the paper bags where all I did is I wrote down the code at the top, like the 5 or 6 digit or 4 digit SKU code that they're going to use when they weigh it to tell me how much it costs, and I don't write down what's in it. So I've got all these bags, all these paper bags of mystery grains, and I got to open them all up, each one, to see if we have it, and I don't know if we have it, and I'm not even sure, is that oat groats, or is that rye, or winter wheat, or farro, or what is this stuff? And so I end up not using it, or sprouting it, or composting it, or it just goes bad. So in that case, getting a bunch of half-gallon mason jars and putting each grain in a mason jar and then labeling it. And then I can see exactly what I've got and how much I've got, and they're transparent, so I know how much is in each one and when to buy a new one. Then all of a sudden, cooking with grains and keeping grains and keeping them fresh becomes really easy. So it's another example of if I want to cook grains, if I want to eat whole grains in my diet or whatever, then changing the environment to make it easier to do so is actually a much better predictor of whether I'm going to do it than if I watch, a 45-minute motivational documentary on whole grains. Again, I'll be more productive when I have a chair. Another interesting factor with tweaking your backdrop is what I call cascading, which is when you increase your capability in one area, you actually increase your global capability. Not just because that one thing raises the average, but because of the concept that I believe I've talked about in the past called self-efficacy. That now all of a sudden I can do something I couldn't do before. So let's take flossing, for example. So I knew that I wanted to floss. And I knew that flossing was good for me. And I knew that I'd gotten a lot of cavities in my life because I hadn't had the world's best dental hygiene. And flossing is something that, a lot of people don't do. And I felt like if I could just do that, then that'd be great. But for years, decades, I did not do it reliably. I would get the talk, I would get the floss every time. I went to the dentist twice a year, and about every other time I'd have some cavity or something that needed to be worked on or refilled, and they would show me the x-rays, and I could feel, that moment when you're at the dentist and the hygienist is sort of like scratching, and then like they stay in an area and like, oh, is that a cavity? And then yeah, it's a cavity. That feeling, that moment, it was enough to motivate me for a few days, but not long term. And once I handled flossing, I became a different person. Not just about flossing, not just about dental hygiene, but all of a sudden, it's like I have the power to change whatever I want to change. And all of us, with that confidence, I then began to apply it in other areas. I then began to do more exercises during the day. I'd find places to do exercise, find places to do triggers. And even if I wasn't specifically following the Tiny Habits formula, I was now a different person. I was a person who could at will change behavior, add a habit. It suddenly became, it's like the difference between, I remember, what year was it? 1978, when I first got, what was it? It was the first computer game. It was Pong. It was the little green thing, and I had to hook it up. I can't remember, it was like in Atari or in television or what, like the very first system. There was no graphics, there was no color. It was just, green and black. But the amazing thing was I had this controller and I had to hook it up to where the rabbit ears of the antenna would go. And for the first time ever, I was controlling what was on that television screen. And my whole life up to that point, 13 years, had been I was the consumer of television. Whatever was on was what I had to watch. All I could do in voting was change the channel, and there were 7 channels. Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 11, Channel 13, 7 channels, or I could turn it off. And that was the extent of my agency over the television. But all of a sudden, with this Atari or in television or whatever it was, I could turn a knob and move the paddle in Pong. It had one player Pong, 2 player Pong, so there were 2 of us who could play against each other, and it also had breakout. And for the first time, I had agency over that television. And for kids who grow up with screens, with smartphones and tablets and computers, we're used to being able to control our screens. But the first time I did that, it was an intoxicating sense of power. So that's what I mean by increasing global capability, that when you feel like all of a sudden you have the power to do something you couldn't do before, you start looking around and saying, where else can I apply this power? Where else can I take a habit that's not serving me and change it into one that is serving me? Take a quick break now. Any questions? Anybody posting anything? No? Yep. All right, I'll put this out there for folks who are listening live. The fun part here is brainstorming. So if you have a habit that you would like to shift, and to add, to change, if you have a lifestyle that you'd like to tweak in some way, call in. It's fun to talk about that. You can give an alias. You can give us the name of your favorite movie star. If you don't want to talk about it on the air, we can keep you anonymous. And it's a very empowering to start to talk to someone about ways in which you can change your behavior. And these principles, I've got to say, sometimes they're hard to apply to yourself. It's much easier for someone else to see how you should behave than for you to do it yourself, and how to change that behavior. There's a great saying, you can't, what's the saying? When you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. So whatever the instructions are for you, it's sometimes easier for someone who's not you on the outside to see, oh, here's what you could do. So anyone listening, watching, who'd like to talk about changing a behavior, give us a call. So my next bullet point here says one battle at a time. So again, sometimes our entire environment can change in a moment. So if you decide I'm going to move to a different house, then you have a chance to reinvent yourself in that new house, in that new neighborhood. If you move to a different country, if you take a different job, well, there are certain things that will change everything for you, that kind of everything in your life reorients around. Having a child, getting into a relationship. These are all opportunities for a type of reinvention. I remember when I spent junior year of college in Israel, and I was a fairly shy person, extroverted but shy, and still am to some extent. And I remember we were, all of a sudden I was on this bus with other people that were in my program in Israel. We're all like 20, 21 years old, and I didn't know anyone. And it suddenly occurred to me that none of them knew me, and none of them knew I was shy. So I didn't have to be shy. I could just be someone else. And so I basically went through this acting exercise and pretended that I was this totally different person, totally extroverted. And I stood up and I walked up and down the bus and I met everyone and I asked them where they were from and what they liked to do and what college they went to and what they were hoping to get out of the year. And I was a good listener and I didn't talk very much. And I discovered, first of all, it was really easy. It was really easy to do this with all these people that I didn't know because none of them had any expectation that I was different. And by the end of that bus ride, I think we went from Jerusalem up into the Galilee, the northern region. I had made friends with everyone on the bus, and everyone assumed that I was like the alpha male, like I was the party, because I was so at ease talking to everyone. And the truth is, I'd never done anything like that in my life. And that night, as I was going to sleep, I kind of felt a little uneasy, like who am I? But that was an example of a global shift that allowed me to adopt an entirely new persona, an entirely new way of relating to people. Now, most of the time, if we're not going to do something like that, if we're still in the same house, in the same relationships, in the same job, in the same country, in the same car, then our shifts are going to be smaller. And we want to be a little bit tactical about them. So I've never been in the military. I expect you have, Amnon, that when you're going to...
Yeah, but a little bit earlier than that.
Okay. But, right, but when, my point is, I think when you're talking about taking and holding land, you want to establish beachheads, right? You want to make sure you have a small, secure area that you can maintain. You don't go and capture the entire desert if you don't know that you can take it. You'll take a small place that you can defend, and from there you're in a stronger position to take the next piece of territory, right? So that's a metaphor that I would like to apply here, that when you're doing any sort of behavior change, when you're doing an environmental shift, sometimes you might say, okay, I'm going to redo the entire pantry. Everything's going to change. But that might be too much. And all of a sudden you've got all these new habits and now you don't know where anything is, right? You ever clean up, or someone else does a total cleanup and then you can't find anything? Or you go through all your papers and your stuff, it was a mess, right? Your office was a mess. There was papers everywhere, but you knew where things were. Like, okay, that mess over there, that pile over there was my taxes. I knew that. That pile over there had bills to pay plus a bunch of other stuff, but at least I could find it. Now I've cleaned everything up, I've foldered, I've filed, and I don't know where the hell anything is. Right? So that's an example of changing your environment too much. So instead of changing the entire pantry, you can say, let's just handle grains. Let's just take all the beans, all the legumes, the split peas. How many types of lentils I have in my house? I've got red lentils, yellow lentils from the Indian store, green split peas, green lentils, which look to me like brown lentils, French lentils, which look like little rocks, but they're expensive. And all of those would go in these little paper bags unmarked, or they would go in plastic. Some of the places have plastic bags, and then I would hook a fingernail on it, and I would have like this Niagara Fall of lentils all over the counter and the floor. Just handle that. Well, now all of a sudden, I got some glass jars, everything's in there, and now I can see it. And maybe next week I'll handle pasta, or dried fruit, or condiments. Right? One of the tweaks I did was I went and bought these Lazy Susans, these turntables, so that I had all these cans and condiments. And before, the cans and condiments were all like stacked from back to front. And so what I would do is I'd look in, I couldn't see something, I would just take from the front, and I would assume, oh, well, I guess there's no pumpkin puree. So next time I go to the store, I'll buy about three cans of pumpkin puree. And then as I'm putting them in, I'll discover, oh, I had another 4 cans of pumpkin puree in the back that I just didn't know about. So by having a turntable, I was able to, one quick turn, I was able to see the inventory. And so I stopped buying silly multiples of things that I already had too many of. So one battle at a time when you're tweaking your background. Another way to tweak your background is to make it simpler. There's been a lot of research lately on the idea of choice as drag, as friction. So the more choices you have to make, the harder it is to make a decision. And decisions cost energy. So y'all know that our brain is the single largest consumer of energy in the body. It's, our body runs on glucose, basically on sugar, on simple carbohydrates, and our brain is the biggest hog. And it turns out that making decisions is the biggest expenditure of the brain's energy under normal circumstances. And so our brain wants to, our bodies, our systems want to conserve energy. We don't want to be wasting it. And one way to do that is to stop making decisions. That's actually probably where the habit pathway comes from. Why, if I had to make a decision every time I wake up in the morning, which foot am I going to put out first? Which leg am I going to put my pants in? What route am I going to take to the kitchen? What am I going to drink first thing in the morning? What glass should I use? Everything we do is a decision. And again, if you can tell, because when you move to a strange place or start a new job, then all that energy has to be expended, and you start noticing it. So if you're in a new environment, you go to a hotel room and you've never been there before, you have to spend time thinking about when you get out of the elevator, do I go left or right? And I don't have a great sense of direction. I can do that for a week. Oh, which way is it? I have to look and see what numbers are on the walls. Right, so the things that are habitual, all of a sudden, when they're not habitual anymore, we have to make decisions about them. It can be very draining, very fatiguing. So one important way to tweak our backdrop is to eliminate decision fatigue. I don't know if are you on Facebook, Amnon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but a little bit.
So there was something that went around last week. It was very funny. Facebook CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg was on paternity leave. He's rich, but he ain't that rich. He was on his wife's maternity leave, and he came back, and he posted a very charming photograph of his closet, and his closet showed about 12 gray T-shirts and 12 gray hoodie sweatshirts, and his caption was, "Having trouble deciding what to wear first day back on the job." And the reason he does that, the same reason Barack Obama in interviews said that he only has two types of suits, and they're all exactly the same, is that he's too busy to have to make decisions. When you get up in the morning, you've got a full wardrobe, and you have to figure out what are you going to wear every day. It's a little bit of taxation on your brain. So Amnon, I don't know. Do you ever get in front of the microphone? You have a uniform. You wear.
That's all I wear. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to make any decisions in the morning. I know what I'm going to wear. But I was going to ask you. So, are you saying that by making decision, you can lower your glucose level?
Yes, by making too many decisions, well, you're causing a demand for glucose, so you're probably going to end up with a spike.
Interesting.
But there have been really interesting, and the idea about decisions is that it's the energy you expend on decisions is a zero-sum game to the energy you expend on willpower. So here's a really interesting study. Two groups of people, experimental, two different experimental groups. They sit down at a table, and while they're waiting for what they think is the study, they say, oh, well, another group was just in here, or another group's coming in right after you, and they have two bowls on the table. There's a bowl of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies and a bowl of raw radishes. And one group Group A is told, listen, the other group's coming in, the radishes are for them, but you can have the cookies. Group B is told, the other group's coming in, the cookies are for them, but you can have the radishes. And they weren't supervised, so they had to use willpower. And the idea is you need to use more willpower to resist cookies than radishes. Right? Most people, you put a bowl of radishes in front of them and say, don't eat those, they're like, no problem. Put a bowl of hot, fresh, gooey chocolate chip cookies in front of them, right? I started salivating as I said the word gooey, right? So even imagining it, you can start salivating. Seeing a picture of it, you can start salivating and start wanting it. The habitual, the neural pathway for completion of that is already set up. And then when you can smell it and see it right in front of you, and you can feel the heat coming off them, that is basically torture for your system, not for you.
No.
All right, maybe.
I guess it's a habitual thing, I mean,
Right.
knowing I shouldn't eat the cookies, I just don't want them anymore after all these years.
Right. Well, you're.
I love radishes.
Radishes.
Oh, I love radishes.
Okay. Well, a good thing you weren't in this experiment, because too many people like you, we would not have had good conclusions.
All right, they wouldn't even take me on that, would they? Say, no, you cannot come in here.
So what's interesting then is that they followed this with asking people to do the quintessential willpower test, which is to dip your arm into a bucket of ice water and see how long you can leave it there. It's a archetypal endurance test. So you'd think if you had two groups of people, and you randomly assign them to Group A or Group B, that basically, people would basically keep their hand in the same amount. There would be no differences since you randomize. Some people are very sensitive to cold and would pull it out quicker. Some people would hold it in longer. But basically, any difference in these two groups would be based on something that happened in the experiment. And in another iteration of the study, they had people then solve a puzzle. And the puzzle was unsolvable. There was no solution. It's like one of those where you have to trace a picture, some lines on a piece of paper, and do the whole thing without retracing or lifting your pencil. And it's very easy to make this impossible. And this was an impossible one. And so in both cases, it's a test of how much are you willing to endure, how much frustration or pain or discomfort are you willing to endure. And the group that had to spend more energy resisting the cookies did much worse in the endurance tests. They spent about half as much time before quitting on the puzzle, and they spent half as much time with their hands in the cold water. So they had depleted their reserves through resistance. So that's willpower will affect your ability to have willpower. And decision making has also been shown that people who are forced to make lots of decisions, even something that's not even real, like they're taken in studies to a website and asked to plan a wedding, not even their own wedding, but just like what tablecloth, what napkins, what linen on the invitation envelopes, that people find that fatiguing, and they can't perform as well in tests of endurance and things like that. So simplicity is a key goal for our environment. So that's one of the reasons that I wrote a report called the Oatmeal Report, where it's just the Oatmeal Project, which is basically saying, you know what, if you like oatmeal, then eat oatmeal every single day. Stop for breakfast. Stop trying to decide, do I want toast with fruit? Do I want muesli? Do I want a smoothie? Just have oatmeal. Every morning, just make oatmeal. And then once that's your habit, you could add a little bit of shredded coconut one day, some flax seeds the next day, frozen blueberries, fresh strawberries, a little bit of maple syrup, some vanilla. Then, you know what? Maybe instead of oats, you make it with brown rice and you make like a rice pudding. And then, but starting with simplicity rather than saying, here are 24 choices, right? We are overwhelmed by choices. So one way to tweak your environment is to cut back on the number of choices. So one thing about that is that when you are fatigued, when you have too much decision fatigue, that means addiction will beat motivation. Because remember we said motivation peaks and troughs. So you go to the weekend lectures and on how to eat better and you get very excited, or you get a bad blood test and you get very motivated, or I go to the dentist and they give me the talk and the floss and I'm motivated. But when I am fatigued, when I've made too many decisions, when I have to expend too much willpower, that means that my addiction, my old habits, are always going to beat my motivation, pretty much every time. So some other examples of how I've tweaked my environment. I bought a glass water bottle for carrying around. I had like a canteen, a steel canteen. It was nice. It didn't, it wasn't one of these plastic ones, so the nothing was leaching. But visually, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see how much I had drunk because it was opaque. Not only that, I left out in the sun and somehow it bulbed a little bit, and so the bottom bulbed out, and so now it didn't quite sit straight, so it looks like it was going to tip over. So I didn't want to put it on my desk, so I kept it on the floor. And so for all those reasons, I couldn't see how much was in it. I wasn't drinking as much water. Then I went and I bought a glass bottle with like a little protective film around the outside, so if I dropped it, it wouldn't necessarily break. And then I would have it there, and I could see, just like this glass, I can see how much water is left in it. And then I got the cue, okay, you've drunk only that much, you've drunk that much. Oh, you almost finished it. Now I could then drink the water and see how much was left, and the glass bottle was now a cue for me to drink more water. Another thing that made a huge difference in my environment was buying an electric pressure cooker. These things are fantastic. You can cook beans quicker, and it's not even that much quicker, but it's basically like you don't have to babysit it anymore. It cooks. When it's done, it turns itself on low or it turns itself off. And when I had used a regular pressure cooker, things would burn, it would shriek and whistle, or if I'm cooking something on the stovetop, I could neglect it or forget it or have to sit there. I just now, if I want to make cook beans, I just take the beans, add water, put it in the pressure cooker, push the button, and 30 minutes later, I've got beans. It has simplified my life to the point where now I use the pressure cooker maybe 2-3 times a day. I have 2 of them now in case I ever want to do rice and beans in the same meal. And I have a rice cooker. So you might argue it's a little bit of overkill. Another was, and I learned this at Kripalu, which is a yoga center up in Lenox, Massachusetts. So I've been hearing for a while about the health effects of certain Ayurvedic spices, like turmeric, like cumin, like curry powder. And there's a lot of, decent evidence about fennel seeds, that these have, very, very potent positive effects on the body, and anti-inflammatory properties, antifungal properties. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to get more of that into my food. At Kripalu, they had every table, they had a shaker for like turmeric, cayenne pepper, curry, cumin, like a basic sort of Indian spice on the table. And I thought, well, if I have all those spices and they're all in the cabinet, and I have to go, if I want to add some to my food, I have to take out 5 or 6 of them, add bits, put it back. I'm not going to do it. But if I make a shaker out of the stuff I want to put, and I put it on the dining room table, then it's right there, and I'll probably reach for it, and that has worked. Another was if I want to eat more vegetables. Fresh vegetables are sometimes hard to find in season. Frozen vegetables are often much more highly nutritious, especially if the frozen vegetable was picked at the height of its freshness, flash frozen, then I'm getting it literally minutes after its peak nutritional state, as opposed to some fresh vegetable like a broccoli from California that's been on a truck for a week and it's been degrading ever since. So for me to eat more vegetables, I have no problem with frozen vegetables, keeping them in the freezer. And then I got, those steamer baskets that you get, they sort of unfold like these little metal leaves. I don't know what it is. I'm like, the guy of Mice and Men who keeps on accidentally like killing rabbits because he's so strong. I destroy these things. I don't know what it is. I'm just buying cheap ones, but they're always falling apart on me. And so instead, I went and shopping, and I got a silicone steamer basket. It's kind of floppy. It's kind of cute. It's bright green. And I have my frozen vegetables. I have my pressure cooker, and I have my steamer basket, and I just put it in for like a minute. And now it's really, really easy for me to get fresh vegetables any time of year. And I don't have to worry about, are they in the fridge? Have they gone bad? Have they turned into like a sad little pile of decay? Right? They're always going to be fresh in the freezer. And that's one way that I've tweaked my environment to really increase my uptake.
Do you want somebody to come in?
Sure.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello. Welcome.
I'm Dr. Corey, and from the platform of Dreams Come True Coaching hashtag. How are you?
I'm very well, Dr. Corey. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate your acceptance here.
Oh, it's great to have you. What's on your mind?
Well, I saw your triangle be well. It is this triangle that you're talking about. What is exactly? I hear that I came a couple of times. I saw that you're talking about some nutrition or something.
Well, so the my practice is. Oh, we'll mute you out for a second there. Sounds like a windstorm just came up. My practice is helping people with informed medical decision making, so that if people get the facts about the effects of lifestyle and diet, as opposed to pharmaceutical drugs and surgeries, then they can make good choices. So the triangle really refers to the triangle region of North Carolina, but it also refers to three important aspects that people need in order to be well. They need information, they need skills, and they need access to evidence-based practitioners.
And you're a medical doctor, it sounds like?
I am not. That's part of my charm is that I did not go to medical school, so I have not been trained by pharmaceutical companies. I don't owe money for my education. I simply do the research. I'm a trained health researcher. I have a doctorate in health studies and a master's in public health. And I don't get paid for treatment. I get paid for advice so that I don't have any conflicts of interest.
Excellent, excellent. I used to be a personal trainer and into Reiki, into nutrition, exercise. I went through massage school and worked with chiropractors, and I worked in the gym and so forth. My father was a medical doctor. You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there are two both very powerful paradigms, and that certain things you need to go to a doctor for, and certain things it's better to go to a massage therapist for.
Yeah, but I went back to school and I got my master's in marital family therapy, then PhD in psychology and a PhD in business, and master's in science of law. So I became a researcher and finally a coach and a consultant in life coaching, career coaching, and business consulting.
I see. So is there anything you want to talk about for my presentation today? Any questions or observations?
My question is that, because I do a lot of research and I'm very, very informed about nutrition and exercise and pharmaceutical issue, one of the things that kept coming up during my research and academic work in psychology, for example, they freely giving, talking about health issues too. Um, in other words, these relaxants to kids in order to um, help them with attention deficit issue in school.
When you say,
And go ahead.
I'm not sure what you mean by relaxants.
What I'm saying is that there are pharmaceuticals that have medications for hyperactivity, attention deficit issues with
Right.
kids in school.
Okay, sure.
They give them medications, prescribed medications to calm them down and get them to sit however hours in the class, and then afterwards just have their heads in the books and just come back and regurgitate the material to get an A, in other words. My question to you is that what is position of ethical issues in pharmaceutical companies making or coming up with all these medications to begin with, giving it to the licensed medical doctors, psychiatrists,
Right. So,
different fields, in order to give it to these kids instead of teaching them about health, nutrition, exercise, so they could get rid of some of that energy coming to class, for
right.
example.
So let me give you my response, which is, to me,
Okay.
the only ethical issue is giving people the information so they can make the decision, to make a good decision. So if you give someone incorrect information or incomplete information, or you lie to them, then they're making a choice that's not really consensual. So to me, that's the ethical issue. So then when we look at the science, we see that the kids who are on these medications end up doing better on one measure only, which is compliance. They are more obedient. Teachers can manage them better. I would argue that that's not the purpose of education. They don't do better in school. They don't have better test scores. They don't have better outcomes. And we're seeing an epidemic of depression and bipolar disorder and schizophrenia in the generation that has come of age during this doping of children. So I would say the evidence points to these are dangerous drugs. They should not be given to children under, in general, certainly until every other avenue has been tried. Nutrition, as you mentioned, nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, teaching kids useful things, as opposed to just locking them in a classroom in an unnatural situation and boring them to death and then medicating them into compliance. So for me, that's the issue. Does it work? Does it give people health outcomes they want and life outcomes they want? And if it doesn't, then at least share the research so that parents can make informed decisions instead of being railroaded by psychologists and by educators who are simply, just trying to get by in classrooms in which there's no law and order. So I'm looking at the time. Dr. Corey, I hope that that helps clarify my position and answers your question. And I'm going to have to wrap up in just a minute, but I'm just curious, did that help?
It helped as an introduction, but the thing is that there is a lot of teenagers, either there is suicidal or homicidal or some kind of strange activity that goes on, and pharmaceuticals are not paying for the side effect that caused this kind of a problem.
Absolutely. I have to interrupt you for a second. My producer is telling me that we need to wrap up. If you can come back next,
I appreciate
if you can come back next week, I'd love to continue this. It's definitely a great topic, is to talk about the epidemic of ADHD. Right now.
I appreciate that. We all following each other. Hopefully, we can learn from each other, and when the shows comes up, we can also call each other or contact each other to further, question, comment, or anything that may be of learning, of course. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Be well. All right. Well, that was fun. And I'm looking at the time, another hour has gone by. And I haven't finished my presentation yet. So this is turned into a 4-week session. Next week, so here's the deal. We're going to start with the slide that says Think 80/20. So we're gonna start with that, and we're gonna cover the piece of paper. So this is an environmental tweak. I'm going to write down 80/20. So that's my slide to start with next week. So we'll finish this presentation on habit formation. And as Dr. Corey indicated, maybe we'll talk a little bit about psych meds and maybe psych meds in children. So I'll see if I have the time to put something together. Otherwise, whatever the topic will be, it will be dedicated to your wellness, dedicated to giving you the information, the skills and access to make good decisions. And the big umbrella of all of that is the vision, to know that true wellness is possible, to know, in this case, that behavior change is possible. Most of us don't think it is. Most of us think, well, we're stuck. I've been this way my whole life. I can't change. I hope these sessions have convinced you at least a little bit that science believes that change is not only possible, it's inevitable. And then when we follow the basic principles of change, we can reinvent ourselves. We can transform ourselves, and we can become the best version that we were meant to be. So again, Howard Jacobson from Triangle Be Well. Check out everything I've got on offer at tbwell.com and click the events tab to see what's happening in the Triangle region. I've got some good, exciting announcements of stuff that's coming up, stuff that will be available probably starting next week. And thank you, Amnon, as always, for your water and your studio and your warmth and your wisdom.
You're welcome.
And as always, be well, my friends.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.